Let's talk about what applications will and won't work and why. The first one we need to talk about is also one of the most popular applications, that being heat transfer vinyl. Understand, we're not printing or cutting anything. Instead, we're cutting shapes, logos, or other designs with a vinyl cutter and then using a carrying film or transfer paper to align it on our substrate and press. Our customers use this application on shirts, bags, koozies, and caps, among other garments and accessories.
Now, we're not printing, but we can still apply multiple colors, right?
Sure, we've accomplished that by pressing one layer at a time. Now, if you do want to print out a photo or some artwork, there are a couple of ways to apply that to our garment. The first of which is using dye sublimation, which we talked about in our most recent webinar. In this application, we would print onto transfer paper using a dye sublimation printer and then apply heat and pressure. Dye sublimation has a real vibrant look and has the softest hand of any garment decoration method because you're not adding anything to the fabric.
So it still breathes well.
Right, and it doesn't crack or fade during washes.
Now explain why that is.
Well, the science behind dye sublimation is that the heat activates the printed design so that the ink turns into a gas and stains the polymers in the fabric. Now, whether we understand the science or not, the point is that dye sublimation is different from traditional ink printing, in which a printer simply coats or adds color to a material surface. Instead, sublimation actually recolors the fabric itself.
It's the same reason you can't undye an egg or scratch the color off of a tie-dye t-shirt. It's a subsurface application.
Right.
So why pick any other application?
Well, while dye sublimation is an attractive application, you're limited in two key ways. First, the substrate needs to be white. If you try to do this on a dark color, you'll just end up with a muddy-looking mess.
So I have to stick with white.
Right. Also, sublimation only works with polymers. Natural fibers like cotton don't really retain the dye. So polyester is the only garment material that works absolutely.
Wow, so we're limited to white polyester?
As far as textiles go, yes. However, dye sublimation also works on polymer-coated substrates like ceramic mugs, mouse pads, and license plates.
Okay, so this is how people put artwork and sometimes photographs on their mugs.
Right, and the end result is a high-resolution design that, again, won't chip, crack, or wash off.
All right, it's a really cool application, but with some limitations, especially if your bread and butter is decorating cotton tees.
Well, while sublimation works beautifully with poly substrates and polyester, chromoblast works with cotton textiles. While this application doesn't penetrate the material the same way as sublimation does, it uses a similar process, and it's another profitable application for an EnduraPress heat press that results in vivid, durable transfers. And again, it works great on cotton garments.
I sense there's a but coming on.
But you are still limited to white shirts, or it just won't look right.
So there has to be a way for us to use a heat press to apply a colored print design to a colored shirt.
You can use printed vinyl in what I call the print and cut process. Or you can use laser transfer with two self-heating papers to add a layer of white under the design so that the color of the fabric doesn't interfere with the process colors in your design.
Now, it sounds like the only difference is whether you're using an inkjet or a laser printer, but the application itself is different, right?
Yes, so let's talk about using an inkjet for print-cut digital transfers. The workflow involves printing your design with registration marks that can be detected by certain vinyl cutters for quick contour cutting. So obviously we're talking about three pieces of equipment here: a printer, a cutter, and a heat press. We add the vinyl cutter so that we aren't applying a design on a white sheet of media that looks like a piece of paper stuck on a t-shirt. Instead, we only see the printed image on the shirt. After printing and contour cutting, we then weed away the unprinted portions of the design, just like you do when you cut and weed vinyl graphics for banners. Then you press the garment for however many seconds, depending on the transfer paper you're using. Finally, we open the press and peel away the heat transfer tape, and you've got a contour cut decal that looks terrific on your shirt.
Now, these do look great, but it definitely has a different feel than the dye sublimation shirts.
Yes, because we've added to the surface of our substrate. In essence, we've fused a sticker to the surface of the shirt. It gives you great versatility in that you can add color designs to various kinds and colors of fabric: cotton, polyester, blended garments, black, white, chartreuse, or whatever. But yes, it is a little different to the touch, and naturally wouldn't breathe quite as well as sublimation, but there are some really soft, stretchable products available for this application.
Okay, so that's an inkjet digital transfer. What about laser?
Well, laser transfer has some advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is you don't have to weed the vinyl for each shirt you apply. This can be a big time savings depending on the complexity of your design. This is largely thanks to what we call self-weeding paper. We don't have to cut and weed our design. Only the image is printed and transferred, kind of like the crackerjack tattoos we used to get as kids. So it works a little more like sublimation, where you're transferring an image directly to the fabric, and of course you only need two pieces of equipment: the printer, and the heat press.
But, of course, you said there are some disadvantages, too.
Yes, well, your selection of printers is a little bit more limited. You have to make sure you have a laser printer that is compatible with the type of paper that you're using. So the initial investment is a little more than with sublimation. As for the process, it can be simple, but it also requires a specific kind of heat press and some skill to master using the two-step self-weeding papers that are required for decorating dark garments.
And since we're talking about the EnduraPress, let's get a little more specific. What kind of heat press do you need for laser transfer, and why?
The self-weeding papers need specific amounts of pressure across the sheet. Clamshell presses tend to produce more pressure at the back and less at the front as they close. The presses that work are the ones that produce even pressure front to back and side to side. So a swing-away press, like the EnduraPress SA12 or SD20, would be the best choice here. With the two-step papers required for decorating dark and colored apparel, swing-away presses produce even cutting of adhesive required to fix the toner to the shirt.
It feels harder than the dye sublimation, but maybe not quite as hard as the inkjet transfer. Overall, this application has a really nice look. Now, for those who may have joined us late, you may be wondering when we're going to talk heat presses. We'll look at the different EnduraPress models in a couple of minutes. Right now, we're just introducing you to the many profitable applications at your disposal when operating an EnduraPress from SignWarehouse.
Well, let's just point out one more application, and that's hot fix rhinestones.
Now, I've heard the bedazzle haters call rhinestones a trend for years now. The truth is, if it's a trend that's not going away.
You're right. Hot fix rhinestones are fashionable and relatively easy to apply. We simply stencil or freehand a design onto your hot fix transfer tape. You align the rhinestones, lay in your garment, and press. You can literally double the value of any garment in mere minutes.
All right, so we just covered a number of applications with which you could be making money with your new EnduraPress heat press. Remember, whether you hope to start adding one or all of these applications, make sure you do your homework on comparable fabrics, what kind of printer you would need, what kind of inks, all of that. Of course, we at SignWarehouse will be happy to help in any way we can as you weigh through your options.